Okay, welcome back everyone to our first brown bag luncheon for the year. As you can see by our newsletter, we are working on diversity issues at this point throughout the year, and so we'll be having different speakers, which we'll talk about later. At this point, I want everybody to be sure and turn off their microphone because it produces feedback if we're not careful. Questions and answers will occur at about 20 after or when Dr. Knowles is finished. Uh, you can type them in the chat, or when we come to the question and answer session, you can actually speak into the microphone and that kind of thing if you raise your hand at the bottom. Other than that, we are thrilled to have Dr. Knowles back with us. He's done brown bags before. He's done our podcast, as a matter of fact, and so he's been a strong supporter of research throughout his time here, especially with students. And so today he's going to talk about Indigenous issues in research, and so I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome, Dr. Knowles.
Thank you, Dr. Lovern. I'm honored to be here. It's my privilege to be able to be here with you guys today. Um, and I will say this up front, and I hope that I remember to tell you later. If anyone has any questions after this session, feel free to give me a call at 333-5494, or you can email me. I'm easy to find. I'm at 1025 Nevins Hall. So you can come by and ask for me at any time. I'm usually here 5 days a week from 9-ish, 9:30, 8:30 to 5 in the evening. I don't want you to make a special trip, though, to find me without emailing or calling first, because I am often called away to meetings and the like. So I don't want you to make a special trip here to ask me a specific question or to have a specific discussion if, in fact, I'm going to be in a department chairs meeting or something of that nature. So anyway, you're always invited to my office. So come on by if you're in the neighborhood. Today, I've been asked to address the issue of research of indigenous populations, how to properly do that. And I was telling Dr. Yankowski, who's in the audience here, that it's interesting because we just had this discussion with a session that we co-taught a couple of weeks ago about the very same thing, just about. It has to do basically with knowing the cultural fixtures that one should apply as a researcher. Um, it's just, if you want to break it down, it's having good manners, not approaching non-Western people from a locked-in Western paradigm. You have to know enough about the culture or be willing to learn about the culture to the degree that you will be open to constructive uh, suggestions and the like. So it is similar to the questions that I know Dr. Lovern and I have both answered. I think Dr. Yankowski has as well, about what sort of etiquette one should display if they go to an Indian event of some sort, a powwow or something like that here in the States. And it's similar to that. I mean, you don't walk into someone's tent or a teepee or whatever construction they have there, because that's their temporary home. You don't do that. You don't speak to the elders informally. You pay them absolute proper respect. You don't use profanity. You don't use abrasive language. None of that stuff. It's just common courtesy when meeting people that you don't know. But it extends a little further than that when you want to do research, because understand this: as a Western researcher, if you go amongst an indigenous population and you don't handle it right, you're going to get misinformation, intentional misinformation. You're going to get played, and the respondents will be doing that because they think that you don't take them seriously, and why should they answer your questions in an accurate manner, in a helpful manner, if you're not taking them seriously, and you're not going to the effort of learning anything about them other than your very narrowly focused research questions. So uh, you have to understand that you cannot see indigenous populations as subjects. That's the error that social scientists in the past have made. And it's been documented in a widespread fashion. It's not hard to find clear evidence of that, even amongst some of the big names in the canon, of researchers who have gone amongst indigenous populations and treated them as the other. Now, it's true, culturally they are the other, but they're also human beings. They're human beings, and you need to respond to them as such. You can't see them as subjects, if that makes sense. So you have to approach them with proper respect and proper um, recognition of human dignity for them. That's the main error that researchers make in the indigenous world. It's always good that you know some of the language. That's always good. I mean, if you were going to do long-term travel to France or Germany, it's always a good thing in the eyes of the locals there, for instance, to know a little French or a little German. If you're going to stay there for a while, you should be armed with a little bit of that. And, often you'll find that the locals find that charming, even if you have the vocabulary of a 3-year-old. It's still charming because you went to the effort of trying to find a way to connect with them on a cultural basis, because language is absolutely cultural. So it's good if you know that you're going to go out to Navajo, for instance, and do research over the span of a summer or whatever, something like that, a hypothetical. It is good, although Navajo is not really the language to pick if you want to learn it quickly. It is a very complex language, but nonetheless, just the phrases like good morning, how are you, thank you, good evening, my respects to your family. That's an important one in every language in Native America, is my respects to your family, because that is something that we say amongst each other as a greeting. So that sort of thing. And understand that you might be faced with probing questions. I had an exchange actually earlier this week with a Native American academic and very well-known legal academic who is actually an acquaintance of mine, a friend of mine, and she was asking me about my lineage and to what nation I belonged and my clan and things of that nature. And to the outsider, it may seem that that's rude, but it is commonplace. We do that. If I know another Native American, let's say an Ojibwa. See, I'm Muskogee. My people are from here in Georgia, but let's say I know a Native American who is Ojibwa, and I haven't seen them for a year. I would certainly ask after their family first, even before I asked them how they were. So it's that variation of courtesies there. And another possibly interesting wrinkle in terms of indigenous research, depending on what your topic is you have to understand the notion of patrilineal, matrilineal. Unlike the Western world, most of Native America, and I'm including Canada and Central America in that equation as well, are matrilineal. That means that women you trace your family and your ancestry primarily through the mother's side. Now, the Western world traces it patrilineal. That's why many of you have the surname of your father, not your mother, your father. So it's that's an indicator of patrilineal. And you don't have to look very hard to see where gender is fairly specific in a Western view in terms of the bestowing of property, inheritance and things like that. And that's not even taking into account the power of gender and what I would really strongly argue, as a patriarchal society that we live in, being the dominant Western society. Well, most of the Native American world is not like that. There are little islands of patriarchy, but they're not patriarchy as we would understand it from the Western perspective, where so much power is steeped up on the male, the male role as opposed to the female. The Sioux people, the Dakota and Lakota, Nakota, those people are patrilineal, but you wouldn't really know it if you look at the respect they give their women. Their women have equal voice, even though inheritance and family is traced through the male line. Okay, most of the rest of Native America and Canada is matrilineal. So not only is the inheritance and familial links traced through the female line, the mother's line, and then the matrilineal grandmother, and on like that. I mean, that's how you decide what your clan is. Now, a clan, many of you may not know this, but a clan is just basically the extended family. It's like when you go to a family reunion, right? Your grandparents may be there, your great uncles and aunts are there, all your cousins are there. That's the clan structure, but it's traced through the mother's line in a matrilineal structure. Now, I say that because that is an error that, uh, well, an error follows from that have been made by Western uh, people, for lack of a better term, for time out of mind, all the way back to contact. And what has occurred historically is the colonial people and the settlers and the explorers, those kind of people, being European, they didn't think women had any authority at all. When in fact they were happening into a matrilineal culture where the women had at least equal, if not superior, authority in civil matters and in every matter really, except for decisions. After the decision is made to go to war, then the decisions slide to the male. Okay, but the women are involved in a council to decide to take aggressive action against another body. Okay. Uh, Now we don't go to war, but we do sue people, and the women, that's our method of war these days. And our women make the decision basically, at least in an equal voice, if not a superior voice, to make the suit. And then the tactical aspects historically would go to the males because of the life giver, life taker duality. Uh, and many of the original Europeans didn't understand that, so they refused to talk to the people who were really in authority, that being the women, because they couldn't imagine women being in authority. But the women were the ultimate authority in many peoples, and it remains to be so. So be aware of that. Be aware of where the power lies, and not that anybody in the range of my voice today would be disrespectful uh, to the women associated, but be very respectful and deferent to women, especially the elderly. So women are the revered class, okay, in most matrilineal societies, and the elderly of both categories, male and female, but especially women, they're the most revered of that category. Okay. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Well, dovetailing off of gender there, dovetailing off of the gender. I don't know what research you might have a notion to do, but if you're going to study like gender roles amongst the Apache or something like that, or gender roles amongst the Ojibwa, for one thing, again, it sounds weird even saying that to me, to my mind, because it sounds like you're examining a prehistoric or somehow primitive, and don't ever use that word in a serious nature. Native Americans are not primitive. The cultures are not primitive. The traditions are not primitive. And that's still widely done. It's still widely done. That's like the use of the term third world. And we know in social sciences that that's fallen to disfavor because of the valuation associated with it. But here's another thing that you need to keep in mind. If you're doing gender research, for instance, be very aware and open-eyed about what's going on around you. Okay, because let's say you want to examine the state of the LGBT community, Q community in the Blackfoot in Montana. How do you approach that? Well, you got to know some things. Native Americans generally, and I speak in terms of a monolith here, although we're as diverse as Europe is, but nonetheless, in a monolithic sense, we don't perceive gays and lesbians as being odd at all. They are very blessed in the traditional sense. Now, that's not to say that you never see any anti-gay sentiment on reservations or in Indian communities or towns, because you do. But I would submit to you that that's an imported Western value, and it is not our value, because the traditions dictate to us that someone who is gay or lesbian has been doubly blessed by the Creator. I don't mean to get religious, but I need to explain that construct. So, if you're a straight or a cis male or female, whatever, you've been blessed by the Creator to be that person, to have that identity. But if you are bisexual or gay or lesbian, you really have been doubly blessed, because you're carrying the biology of one and the gender of another, the inside meaning and being of one and the outside meaning and being of the other. So you need to understand that, and that's really contrary to Western view. All right, and there's a lot like that. Another thing is to understand the fabric of morality. Now, I guess I'm painting a scene that's overwhelming to the researcher. How in the world can you internalize all this? Well, you can. You just have to acquaint yourself with it, take it in small bits, and then you can move forward, basically, to be an effective Indigenous researcher. The other thing is the morality. I often use this example in class. So Cordell, I think you've heard me say this, but if you're listening out there and you're one of my prior students, just bear with me for a minute. You'll know this example. But in terms of abject morality, what is morality? Now, morality is a subjective thing. Think about this. It's subjective. Morality is going to be dictated by whatever largely the religious, or because morality arises out of ethics, and ethics will arise not in its purest form, but in its applied form. The way day-to-day people apply what they call ethics arises out of a religious structure, a morality that's associated with religion. Well, that's not so, because if you don't practice the same religious tradition, then there will be some considerable differences. If you don't practice the same religion, and then there's subsequent social functions that come from the religion. I don't mean to be the sociologist here, although I can't seem to escape that. What I mean is this: two very good examples. Okay, two very good examples in a traditional Native American setting. Again, speaking in the monolith, there is variation there, but speaking in the monolith, okay, there is a departure in a lot of areas of morality, but two very specific areas of morality. The first is, you know how the Western world sells you this idea that material accumulation is very important, and the person who dies with the most is the winner, and conspicuous consumption is out there. All that materialism that's out there that drives so many people in our society, drives them to the graves, really, in a very unsatisfied, unhappy life, because they're chasing a brass ring that doesn't even exist. And all of that is made to compel the worker to continue to work toward this imaginary goal. Okay, and that works very well in a Western method of capitalism. Works great. But you know what? Native Americans, they don't function in the Western view of capitalism in the traditional sense. Now, of course, we must, to some degree, because we need to survive. And this is a capitalist world and a Western world, and we have to have these skills. Okay. But inside, we're not driven by those capitalist methods. So what you find in many Indian communities, Native American communities, not to give offense to anyone who has a hang up on either one of those titles, I don't really. But what you find frequently in those communities is that the poorest person is the chief or the ultimate authority in that town or community. And the reason they're the poorest person, they're not the chief because they're the poorest person. They're the poorest person because they're the chief. And therefore, they have a responsibility to all the other members of the community. So, if I am the chief, and I use that term hesitantly because I'm using the term just because we all kind of know what that figurehead looks like. All right. But that figure differs from community to community, from people to people. But nonetheless, so let's say I am the chief in this town. Well, look, if I realize that your crop failed and your corn got washed out down by the river and you've got no food, and I do have food, you know what I'm supposed to do? I'm supposed to give what I have to you. Okay, now that sounds a whole lot like socialism and communism, I guess. That's what I'm told. But that's the Native American tradition. So the person who is of the ultimate political and social authority should not be the one that's surrounded by accumulated wealth. And for Native American traditionalists to look out at the outside world and see how people bring authority and money together in conspicuous consumption, that's just immoral as hell to us. That's immoral to us, okay? Likewise, some of our traditional behaviors are immoral to the Western world. Lots of them are, but the one that immediately comes to attention is the proclivity towards, well, extramarital or premarital sex. There's no morality associated with sexual congress in a traditional Native American world. That only becomes a moral issue when it becomes a property issue, as you will find in the Western construct. Now, when I'm comparing Indian and Western, let me make this statement. I'm not saying better or worse, as Dr. Lovin frequently puts in her writings. It's not a matter of better or worse. It's a matter of different, only different. That's all. I'm not evaluating anything. I'm just saying here's some differences. There's the morality concerning the conspicuous consumption of riches and wealth associated with power. That isn't going to happen in the Indian world, or it should not. Does it happen? Sure, it does. But to the traditional mind, that is immoral. But that sexual activity outside the context of marriage, that doesn't really make sense if you take away the whole notion of property, or because if you take away the notion of property, then that other person doesn't belong to you. And if they don't belong to you, you have no reasonable foundation for jealousy. So what you have basically is sexual congress outside the construct of marriage is basically a physical function. That's what it is, and it has really very, very little to do with the strength of a marriage relationship or anything like that. And of course, the notion is you don't have sex with people you don't like. That'd be ridiculous. But you see the point I'm trying to make there is that if you look at traditional Native American behavior in that arena, the Western world would say, oh, that's horribly immoral. That is just horrible. They're a bunch of animals. They're a bunch of rutting animals. And that claim has been made. And also in a modern day construct of that, the way Native Americans sometimes raise their children, and I say sometimes because I'm talking about some people as opposed to other people in the Native American world, the way we raise our children is seen to be deviantly permissive when, the Native American concept there is that on the one hand, these children are not adults, but they are sentient beings, and you have to treat them with some dignity. You can't respond to everything they do outside your expectation with violence. That is horribly deviant to the Native American mind. So some disconnects there. And if you're going to be the researcher that you could be in the indigenous world and gain the respect of those people that you're dealing with, then you have to understand all these things and try to immerse yourself in and own that culture to a degree. And I'm not talking about misappropriation. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying being respectful of the way other people work and realize that they have just as much right to their tradition as you have to your paradigm. So I think that basically the whole thing is you have to approach the thing with an openness and a respect, just like you would going into any other group. And the mistake that's so often been made is that Native Americans have been perceived as less than, as some kind of subhuman throwback, a link to the Stone Age, so we can treat them as just maybe a sentient animal, somebody who is self-aware, self-conscious, and can speak. So they're that link between the great apes and humans, I suppose, is the way some people have seen it. And you really, obviously, you need to abandon that. That is a function of the 1800s, although it still persists in some of the literature. And with that, I think I'm at 12:30. So let me go ahead, so I don't keep talking. Let me go ahead and open it up to questions. Any questions from anyone?
Well, first, I want to thank you for your presentation and the words you put in there. And while they're thinking of their questions, let me pose one to you. One of the problems that I see still is when I write, I generally use Indigenous methodologies, which are distinctly different than methodologies used, say, in the humanities or the social sciences. But these are still highly suspect by many of our editors.
Right.
what would you say to students about incorporating, or even faculty, about incorporating indigenous methodology as opposed to taking a Western methodology, like in your field of sociology, into a research project with indigenous people?
Well, it's going to be it's a battle of credibility, and I'm preaching to the choir with you, Dr. Lovren. You certainly know this. We've had conversations about this in the past, but you know, when you author a book from indigenous eyes and you bill it that way, you sell the project as this is something I'm looking at from an indigenous perspective. This because I'm in your case Cherokee. Uh, and then the publishers say, no, 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 this can't be right. This is not the right approach to take here. And they buy the project because it's indigenous, but then they want to force you the square peg in a round hole. They want to force you into a Western paradigm. And uh, my my advice, and I think you're a very good example of this. My advice to that end is that you don't sell out. You don't sell out. You find another publishing house that is going to honor their agreement with you because they agreed with you to publish an indigenous work. And where you find a lot of the problem, at least where I find a lot of the problem, is that it's not the publisher, it's the blind reviewers out there. And the problem that we have as Native American intelligentsia, for lack of a better term, is the fact that there's some pretenders in our field, basically, that they talk a big game about being Arapaho or Pawnee and all, they're the great saving grace of the people and all this, but they're still writing for a Western paradigm, and they argue against anyone who isn't. I mean, I can think of one example of some tribal official out in Tahlequah, out in Western Cherokee, who who told a very well-established Native American academic, "Well, you're just not Indian enough. Who exactly is your family?" And challenging them on that in that regard. So there's a lot of actual Native Americans who are those live by the fort Indians that we in our Indian community. That's what we call them, to live by the fort, because they're government folks. They really buy into this whole governmental thing. Um, so my only advice in that area, and I think you exemplified as well, if not better than anybody I know, is that you stick by your guns, and if they don't like it, well, you find another publisher. That's what you got to do. You just pull the project. You just say, look, you've not paid me anything for this. You agreed to the project. Now you're changing the rules in it. No, I don't think so. And like I think you've done in a couple of projects, if I'm not wrong.
I have actually. Yeah. Other questions that we have?
I actually have my own question for you. This semester I'm taking a class on public history,
Yeah.
and we've actually been spending a bit of time talking about um, indigenous issues in public history and how people kind of like view Native communities from a historical perspective. And I was wondering if you had any advice or ideas on how to maybe decolonize our understanding of Native American communities, like kind of how do we show that from more than just the Western perspective?
Well, one way of perceiving it, Cordell, that's a good question. But one way of perceiving it is to return back to that paradigm conflict that we were talking about with regard to morality a bit ago. The paradigm conflict also extends over to our relationship. When I say our, the Native American relationship with land, it's not a commodity. I saw a meme the other day on social media that quite correctly associates. It shows a picture of on the one side an old growth pine forest, and on the other side what would be that pine forest if it was leveled and you just clear cut. And it says, in capitalism, the forest has no value unless it's cut down. And land is not a commodity to the Native American world. Native Americans form a spiritual relationship with the land. And not to harp on about this, but um, one way of perceiving it is, in most Native American traditions, everything that the Creator makes has a spirit. just as important and equal to the Creator as your own. And of course, that is contrary to the Western view. When you talk about a stone having the spirit, then people want to lock you up. They're not buying all that. And trees having spirits and all that. No, but in our view, they do have spirits. So you commune, for lack of a better term, not in a hippie sense, but you commune with the land upon which you find yourself residing, and you give proper respect to that land. And we do have a very strong emotional attachment to the homeland, because the homeland is where our ancestors are buried. That was one of the primary problems with the Trail of Tears. Okay, not just a horrifying relocation that was contrary to the law, by the way. The horrifying relocation. The people who died along that trail, some of them died, and I hate to say this because it sounds cliche-ish, they died of heartbreak because they were leaving their parents' bones back in the pine woods of Georgia, and their grandparents and their grandparents, just time out of mind back. That's where the tradition was. And you're leaving that. I mean, you gave your family to the land, and the land is the custodian of the family. And when you're walking around on the land, the people are the custodians of the land. And I think in terms of public use, if you think about public policy generally, if you think about the difference between concepts of land and property ownership, that's really, if I were faced with writing a paper in the area, that's where I would go right there. As I would say, well, look at the different paradigms. I mean, land is not a commodity to the Native American mind. It's full of spirit as any of the rest of us are. I probably talked all around that. I'm being very obtuse today when I'm speaking. I'm sorry.
I have a question for you from the chat. And
Yes, ma'am.
Laura says, as someone who is very new to studying Native American history, but has been studying the works of Native American authors, would you recommend making sure someone who may not be well versed in that historical knowledge respectfully approaches the author's work and culture and heritage? She says, I'm a junior English major, and one of my biggest fears is in my research is focusing so closely on the work itself that the historical significance is ignored.
That's a really astute question, Laura. Very good question. What I would suggest you do is read it not only as literature, but you know from your training how to dismantle literature to get to the core of the human spirit. Do that with the authors, and also be very selective about the authors who claim to be Native American. There are some that flew the flag and made some great notoriety claiming to be Native American. Turned out they weren't. The Educational Little Tree is something that is a book that was, while it's a very good book, I'm not going to say it's not. The guy writing it was a white supremacist. He was a speechwriter for George Wallace in Alabama, and he was writing under another name. That being said, it's a very valuable book, but don't take it as a Native American writer. That's the difference there. Also, what I would suggest is go outside the context of literature and read people like Daniel Wildcat from Kansas and Gregory Kahete, who equates the Native American paradigm with hard sciences. And my favorite, my mentor with regard to Native American intelligentsia matters is Vine Deloria Jr. Vine wrote on so many and diverse subjects concerning the law, hard sciences, the conflict of paradigms of morality, property rights, just a broad, you can make a library out of Vine Deloria, and I know because I've done that. And I will say also in Native American intelligentsia, that is the most stolen book. Other Native American academics steal books from you, especially if they have Vine Deloria on the spine. Not to point fingers at Dr. Lover, because the point is very rude in the Native American world, but I'm pointing with my lips. All right, let's put it that way. So read outside the context of literature. You already know how to deconstruct literature and get to the essence of the writer or the characters, but read outside the context of literature. Read some well-established Native American academics, and if you need a read list, I'm happy to contribute to that. Dr. Yankowski can contribute to it, and certainly Dr. Lover can contribute to it. So we can all throw in and make you up a fine read list to help you define the corners of the box, so to speak, in the paradigm.
It's wonderful. Thank you very much. And by the way, if you leave it on the prairie, it's fair game.
So I've heard.
Yep. Any other questions? And you can write them in the chat, or you can turn on your mic and ask a question. Ashley would love a reading list.
Okay. Let
That's
us
one of the things
email
you
us
put on your bulletin board.
You're welcome. Just email me. Let me know what your topic is, Ashley, or just come downstairs sometime, because she's right up there. She's right up there.
No, put a section on your bulletin board of readings.
That's
like
a good
Oprah.
idea.
I know, I have them.
You have them.
But be like Oprah's reading list.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll call it Oba's reading list, which in Creek is owl, which is an ominous sign. We won't call it Oba. I was just saying that as a joke for the Cherokee.
Nice.
You see that big glandular thing over there? That's a big bulletin board that's going to go out in Nevins Hall by my office across from the glass display case. So be looking for that to be hung up with a lot of Native American stuff, current events and the like.
Let's see. Shelley has a question for you. Says the pushback that was described from publishers against Indigenous methodologies, has that come from inside the university as well? Is there any indications that this might be changing? I'm going to step in a minute and say one of the things that I have tried to do is offer Indigenous methodology on this campus, and so far there have been people, particularly in the social sciences, that have shut it down.
Yeah, they want to know what a philosopher knows about methodology.
Yeah.
That's their argument. And of course, because as much as I like our faculty, there are some here and some administrators who are really stuck in reverse. And that idea might be a really good idea if it was presented by a man. It might be a good idea if a man presented it. So what you need to do is, rationally present it in a meeting, and then get a male cohort who, after you say it and it gets refused, have them say the same thing louder, and maybe pound on the table. And by God, it'll get past them. I put my glasses on again, Shelley. Oh, say that again for Shelley. She lost connection.
Oh, the part where I was talking about, I have worked to offer a Indigenous methodology course, but have faced great opposition from the social sciences.
You know what I think we ought to do, Dr. Lover? If you can work it into your schedule, you design a course and we'll assign it exclusively an NAIS designation.
Ooh, I would love that.
Yeah, and then other people can chime in if they want. But as far as I know, as of yesterday afternoon, I'm the guy that approves projects for NAIS.
Ooh, I like it.
Unless something's happened today that I'm unaware of. I guess that could be.
Yeah. Go ahead, Shelley.
Dr. I was showing you, I'm already like really, really wanting to incorporate it into my methodology courses, and sort of have been to, without telling anybody. But anyway, I'm on board.
Excellent.
You guys ought to have a meeting. Y'all, I think you share a lot of commonality with regard to research objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions we've got going here? No more? Well, I can think of millions, but we can do it another time, as it is getting to be a little bit later in all of this. And I know people have like 1 o'clock classes, not me particularly, but some of you might. I do want to remind everybody that we do send out a newsletter every week that has all the things we're doing. So we've even started advertising for the symposium in the spring. So if you're interested in that, there will be other brown bags. Their dates are listed there, but the next one will be Sandra Jones, who's going to talk about diversity and inclusion issues in research. And then we'll have one on disability issues, and then Dr. James will do one on women and gender. in research, and Dr. Lovett will be doing one on Africana and issues in research. And then next semester, we have some on, I know one from modern and classical languages will be set up in terms of research there. We just couldn't get them this semester. So we've got that. We've got the think tank coming up at the end of the month. It happens every month, and it's open for researchers from beginning freshmen to professors. There's no egos allowed. And it's just simply a session where we have talked about any and every aspect of research and publication that people have. So if you're looking for a mentor, if you're just looking to find some insight, or just join in an interesting conversation, we do have the think tank coming up. The bulletin board, there's only one thing on it right now, and I think it's actually probably outdated as of today, is Georgia undergraduate research. But I just got the notice for the national undergraduate research, and I'll be sending that out. But if you want to participate or you need participants in research, you can put it on the bulletin board and everybody on campus can look at it. So if you're in the humanities and you need a statistician, that's where you advertise for it. And then finally, we have our podcasts, which we have several of them up. We have a few more that need to go up, but we lost Danielle to LSU and the hurricanes. And so we're still having the process of learning that one. And we'll get the rest of the podcasts up. But we'll be doing some more podcasts of students, faculty, and anyone can participate. So if you have any great ideas for any of these, email me or email Cordell, because he's the equivalent of me in undergraduate research. But other than that, I want to thank you, Dr. Knowles, for coming and sharing with us everything. And I want to thank everybody who came today and who will be listening in the future for your participation. And I hope to see you back in other brown bags. So with that, I'll let you all go.
Can I make one more comment as well?
Oh, yeah, one more comment, sure.
Going off of what you were saying about all of our upcoming events, also, of course, keep an eye on your email for the newsletter, but also keep an eye, if you have Instagram, we have our own Instagram page now, VSU Undergrad Research. I'll be putting up some reminders, some upcoming event notifications up there, some fun little discussion posts, so that you can comment on or anything. So that's another platform to keep an eye on as well. So.
Thank you, Cordell, because honestly, Instagram is not something I've learned yet, but I guess I have to. So absolutely. So if you've got anything for us, let us know. If you've got any suggestions of talks, let us know about that. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Lover.